With over 2 decades of dedicated service in the renal healthcare field, Lisa Pacelli is a seasoned registered nurse committed to advancing patient care and improving clinical outcomes. Her career has been defined by a deep passion for nephrology, where she has combined hands-on patient care with strategic involvement in research and product-related activities. Through her tenure, Lisa has collaborated with many teams to improve innovative solutions that enhance the quality of life for patients with chronic kidney disease. Her expertise spans clinical operations, protocol development, and the integration of evidence-based practices into everyday care. She has played a key role in shaping renal therapies through her contributions to clinical trials and product innovation, always focusing on safety, efficacy, and patient-centered outcomes. Driven by compassion and clinical excellence, Lisa continues to be a trusted voice in advocating for advancements that bridge the gap between technology and personalized care. Lisa, it's all yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very honored that Len asked me to speak here today, just to share a little bit about my journey and where I started and to where I actually am today. So my actual career in dialysis started back in 1994. I stepped foot in the clinical dialysis right when I was doing nursing school as a rotation as a student nurse. And I was engaged immediately when I walked in because I thought this was a field where patients and staff really got to know each other, were very friendly, they knew families. It was more of a cohesiveness, and I thought that really stood out. So at the time, I felt, well, maybe what I'll do is apply while I was in school as a patient care technician, because even back then, in the early 90s, there were staffing issues. So I applied for the PCT position, got that position, worked for about 2 years in that position, continued while I was in school, and I was committed. I loved it, I loved the field, I loved everything about it, and it really was something that I never even thought of. My goal was to be an ER nurse, but as time went on, I got more and more involved and entrenched with renal and dialysis. So I finished out my nursing school, graduated, and then I found myself as, of course, the nurse taking care of 6, 9, 12 patients with technicians. Again, short staffing was always an issue. It was an issue then, like it's an issue now. And I worked for about a year as a nurse, having various roles. I did anemia management, some osteodystrophy stuff, and just kind of learned everything I needed to learn as a dialysis nurse. And the next logical step, I thought eventually would be charge nurse somewhere down the road, until my boss came to me and said, well, it's time for you to be the charge nurse. And I didn't know what to say. I was very nervous about it, but I had no choice at the time. So I became charge nurse, and I started to learn more and more and more about my patients, about the field, about the physicians. And I was fortunate enough that this was a very big clinic. It was 48 stations, over 280 patients, completely full, 4 shifts, and I had exposure to a lot of things. I was thrown into reuse. I was thrown in as a technician, even though I was a nurse. I played the nurse. I played management. All of that education and learning early on really sort of developed me so that I can continue to go forward. And always myself being the curious one, I kind of hit every challenge head on, right? So I did that for a little bit of time, and there came a position open, and I learned about it through 2 drug reps that had come to the clinic that I was in at the time, and it was with the Hospital St. Raphael in New Haven, Connecticut. And I didn't know much about it, only that it was a hospital-based program. It had an outpatient, a PD unit, and an inpatient unit, and that managing those units was going to be what I was applying for. So I happily went in for the interview, took the role, and it was explained to me that this was a joint venture between the Hospital of St. Raphael and RRI, which was the Renal Research Institute. And at the time, that didn't really mean anything to me because my main focus was to take care of the patients. Doesn't matter who, I was just gonna take care of patients as I learned to do. So as time went on, I started to notice in this clinic, when I took the job, I started to notice in the clinic, there were several people in my clinic all of the time. The physicians at the Hospital of St. Raphael at the time were very research-oriented. They were always doing something. We always had people in there collecting data, writing protocols, doing something, whether it was for PD or whether it was for outpatient. So I learned a lot about what was happening, and I did have the fortunate opportunity to sit and be invited to the senior management team meetings that were held once a month. And that is where, although I was intrigued by research, I just didn't know what it was about. And I had everything to do not to get beat up because the patients were getting angry, staff was angry, it was a large inner city clinic. I was intrigued, but I really didn't give much thought to it. So I had the opportunity to sit on this senior management meeting, and that's where our very own Dr. Katenko, he described in this in this senior management meeting, all of the research projects that Renal Research was doing. And there was a long list, not in my clinic, but throughout all the clinics that RI had, which I think was about 21 clinics at the time. And that's where I think the switch clicked, because I remember just wanting to be involved and wanting to understand and wanting to know what was happening. And not only with learning about research and development, I felt like I could only, in the one clinic or the hospital or the clinics that I was taking care of at the time, I was only affecting those patients. But if I could participate with research and I understood it, I'm able to impact perhaps all dialysis patients everywhere, right? So I thought, well, this is fantastic. I'm gonna dive head first. So it did not come without difficulties for me, though. I was nervous about it, quite conflicting. I had all I can do to manage that clinic, have people around, have strangers coming in and out, and I really had to think creatively, how to think differently. I really had to be willing to rethink my own thought process and how I thought these clinics should be run. I needed to build some trusting relationships with the researchers that were there, and I needed to kind of step away out of my comfort zone to kind of say, this is okay. They're doing the best research they can for the patients, and this is going to have a lasting effect for the patients, right? So it wasn't always an easy thing, being the staunch clinician that I was, and I wanted that sort of control. And I think throughout my working in the clinics, throughout my whole career prior to that, I always had my own perception, like everybody does, right? And I think I always felt like, well, we have all these algorithms, we have all these work processes, we have all of this technology, and I sort of feel like, well, I'm the person on the floor, I'm the person using this. I felt forced. Why am I, as this clinician, being forced to use all of this when it doesn't seem really aligned with the critical needs that are going on day-to-day practice, right? And I often wonder, well, who made these decisions? And maybe if we were able to voice our opinion or help with some of these decisions, maybe things wouldn't be so bad. And it dawned on me, you know, by not saying anything or not being involved, maybe I was just being a little bit too passive. But I felt like maybe I can be the sort of ambassador for change. Maybe I can sell this to my staff. Maybe I can get them involved. Maybe I can get somebody in a different position to understand that it's the end user that really should have some input in not only research, but also some of the development that comes from this research. So I sort of had to address the status quo that was happening, and we all know that algorithms, workflow processes, technology comes from some type of either scientific or mathematical logic. I mean, that's understood. And the above is really developed by brilliant thinkers, people who are experts in their field. I mean, you can't ask for a better group of folks that I work with right now with developing technology. But the technology is often a product of the research, and when that technology is delivered to the clinics, we're hoping that it's going to be fully adopted by the clinicians, and that's not always the case, because it doesn't always work 100% from the clinical perspective. So I think there is this sort of gap bridge that needs to happen where you have the people in the clinic, the nurses, the technicians, who could really advise, who could really step in, who could really help in this research and in this product development. So it's really the doers and the end users that really should be involved early on, if at all possible. And with that, if you are going to participate in some research and you're going to participate in some product development, you should have some product and clinical expertise, and you need to have the courage to speak up. And I think sometimes we don't in the clinic, at the clinic level, have that courage. Number one, we don't know who to speak to. We just get told we have to do this. And number two, it's not always met with probably the most welcoming response. So we as the clinician, we as the nurse, really are the mouthpiece for healthcare in our patients, and we really need to have that voice. And fast forward several years now into where we have something new with artificial intelligence and predictive analytics, and this is scary to me. I mean, you spent the last hour talking about all of these things. It's scary to me as the clinician, right? Because it does go to, are we going to replace clinicians, which I hope will never happen. Are computer simulations and trainings for future nurses, could this be considered as trusted as peer training? I don't know the answer to that. Trusting clinical recommendations or even decisions from a screen? What about my own clinical intuition? What about what I've been doing for 20 years and what I know about the patients? And really, does AI or predictive modeling eliminate patient assessment and discussion? Well, can the data really tell the whole story? So as Len said earlier, I think it's really about taking these tools, using these tools, and using them to help us only advance forward and really embracing it. And I think the clinical staff, which have been, as I said, the recipient of processes, optimizations, technology for so long, hoping everything works out well and it's very well adopted, I think now more than ever, we need to focus on how research advancement tools in AI and predictive analytics can help us take care of our patients more safely and effectively. Many hands make for lighter work. I'm a firm believer in that. And I think a lot of the times the clinicians and the development and research folks sit on opposite sides of the world. So when I was working in the clinics before I worked for RRI, I had no idea what research was. When I started, it was a large corporation, no idea. When I started at RRI, still had no idea. Now, we still, even in FME, we're considered CD, CE. So we still sit on opposite sides of the spectrum, and that is hard. And I don't know if nurses that are out there working in the clinics really understand what the CE piece is versus the CD piece. So I think there's an opportunity there to kind of bridge that gap. We often might take these opportunities to work in the research as a secondary piece because taking care of patients is the priority, and given financial and budgetary restraints, it's not only very difficult to break away from the clinic, but somehow I think as the end user and the doers of the products and the innovation, we need to be involved early on so that it only enhances our workday and it allows us to take care of the patients very effectively and even more safely than we hope to in any given day that we practice. Some Educational gaps, there certainly are educational gaps, and I think we'll hear later on that what those are and maybe how they're perceived. And I think not only are there educational gaps, but there's opportunity gaps. Coming from RRI, I could never have even asked for any better of an opportunity to be in this niche, little corporation that had carved out clinics that can do their own research. I mean, it was a remarkable opportunity for me to learn and to get into this sort of realm of research, and also as a clinician. It may be, as I said, less about education, more about clinical experience. I can't tell you over the years the number of times Len has called me up and asked me questions, and that sort of feels good because it was sort of bridging that gap. We had that relationship, right? And there are some participation in different societies, ANNA, National Kidney Foundation. If you join any of these groups, they do have opportunities, and I think you'll learn a lot more going forward with our speakers for the rest of the afternoon. And my final thoughts, research needs to be impacted by the doers, not just the brilliant thinkers. I'm a firm believer in that. And there's a fine line between technical superiority, innovation, and real use in the field. And that really is where the commitment should be, real use in the field. And then, innovation is just a concept until it can be used and scaled by healthcare teams. Otherwise, we're just not doing the best that we can, unfortunately. And, nursing, the clinicians, we are the heartbeat of the clinic. Let us be involved. We want to do the work. And I'm on vacation, so you guys are the only thing standing between me and a drink on the beach. So with that, I'll conclude, and thank you very much.